Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Ni hao. Buenos dias. Hesiche. Aquaba. Welcome. What up, though? This is the weekly recorded recitations of Tobati Kukadao. The portion this week is portion numero 26, which is Shmini. The date today is 724.7.26, semicolon 72, semicolon 1, full 2. I'll say it again, 124.7.26, semicolon 72, semicolon 1, full 2. Again, the portion this week is numero 26, Shmini, which includes within the Torah, Shmini, which is Vaikra 9:1 a 11:47. Within the Bhagavad Gita, it is the Aksara Brahma Yogehe, numero 7. Within the Digha Nikaya, it is the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, numero 16.6 or colon 6. Within the Gospels, it is Luke, chapters 7 a 8. And within the Quran, it is Surah Al-Qasas, which is numero 28. And within the Tao Te Ching, it is chapters 70 a 75. We are resuming in the ordinary sequence after a 1 week hiatus, however we want to refer to that. So we're back on the routine schedule, with I think some double portions approaching soon. So this week is a single portion. All that being said, that is what it is for this week. And I can partake of nourishment during daylight hours. Bismillah ar-Rahmani ar-Rahim. Allah wabha. Deus noster qui es in celis, sanctificato nomen tuum, vahegu satnam. Dau kodau fehun dau. Ja. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamotzi lachem min haaretz. Kiri eleison. Sivamastu savajagatehi. Sabe sata bhavantu sukhitata. Fagabia. Ubuntu. Shabano. Fakako. Aquaba upendula amani. Umajika. Shishe. Kamusunida. Domo arigato. Pilama yela wakantaka. Talk bodokashin good. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Go remember God. Atijami yatafanami. Aho. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Amen. Bismillah ar-Rahmani ar-Rahim. Allah wabha. Deus noster qui es in celis, sanctificato nomen tuum, vahegu satnam. Dau kodau fehun dau. Ja. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher katzanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivan l'sok b'davai Torah. Kiri eleison. Sivamastu savajagatehi. Sabe sata bhavantu sukhitata. Fakabia. Ubuntu. Shabano. Fagako. Aquaba upena na amani. Wamajeka. Sheshe. Kamosanida. Domo arigato. Pilama yela wakantako. Talk wadokashin good. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Go remember God. Adjamayata fanami. Aho. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Amen. Torah, Shmini, Vaikra 9:1 a 11:47. And it was on the 8th day that Moshe summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said to Aaron, take for yourself a bull calf as a sin offering and a ram as a burnt offering, both unblemished, and bring them near before the Lord. And to the children of Israel you shall speak, saying, take a he-goat as a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both in their first year, and both unblemished, as a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram as peace offerings, to slaughter before the Lord, and a meal offering mixed with oil, for today the Lord is appearing to you. And they took what Moshe had commanded to the front of the tent of meeting, and the entire community approached and stood before the Lord. And Moshe said, this is the thing the Lord has commanded, to do it, and the glory of the Lord will appear to you. And Moshe said to Aaron, approach the altar and perform your sin offering and your burnt offering, atoning for yourself and for the people, and perform the people's sacrifice, atoning for them as the Lord has commanded. So Aaron approached the altar and slaughtered his sin offering calf, and Aaron's sons brought forward the blood to him, and he dipped his finger into the blood, placing some on the horns of the altar, and he poured the blood at the base of the altar. And the fat, the kidneys, and the diaphragm, with the liver from the sin offering, he caused to go up in smoke on the altar, as the Lord had commanded Moshe. And he burned the flesh and the hide in fire outside the camp, and he slaughtered the burnt offering. And Aaron's sons presented the blood to him, and he dashed it on the altar around. And they presented the burnt offering to him in its prescribed portions, along with the head. And he caused them to go up in smoke on the altar. And he washed the innards and the legs, and he caused them to go up in smoke on the altar, along with the burnt offering. And he brought forward the people's sacrifice. He took the people's sin offering goat, slaughtered it, and made it a sin offering like the first one. And he brought forward the burnt offering and prepared it according to the law. And he brought forward the meal offering, filled his palm with it, and caused it to go up in smoke on the altar, in addition to the grieving burnt offering. And he slaughtered the ox and the ram, the people's peace offering, and Aaron's sons presented the blood to him, and he dashed it on the altar around. And they also presented the fats from the ox and from the ram, the tail, the fatty covering, the kidneys, and the diaphragm with the liver. And they placed the fats on top of the breasts, and he caused the fats to go up in smoke on the altar. And Aaron had already waved the breasts and the right thigh as a wave offering before the Lord, as Moshe had commanded. And Aaron lifted up his hands towards the people and blessed them. He then descended from preparing the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. And Moshe and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. Then they came out and blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. And fire went forth from before the Lord, and consumed the burnt offering and the fats upon the altar, and all the people saw, sang praises, and fell upon their faces. And Aaron's sons Nadav and Avihu each took his pan, put fire in them, and placed incense upon it. And they brought before the Lord foreign fire, which Adonai had not commanded them. And fire went forth from before the Lord, and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moshe said to Aaron, this is what the Lord spoke, when Adonai said, I will be sanctified through those near to me, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron was silent. And Moshe summoned Mishael and Elsaphan, the sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, draw near, carry your kinsmen from within the sanctuary to the outside of the camp. So they approached and carried them with their tunics to the outside of the camp, as Moshe had spoken. And Moshe said to Aaron and to Eleazar and to Itamar, his sons, do not leave your heads unshorn, and do not rend your garments, so that you shall not die, unless Adonai be angry with the entire community. But your brothers, the entire house of Israel, shall bewail the conflagration that the Lord has burned. And do not go out of the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, because the Lord's anointing oil is upon you. And they did according to Moshe's order. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, do not drink wine that will lead to intoxication, neither you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, so that you shall not die. This is an eternal statute for your generations, to distinguish between holy and profane, and between unclean and clean, and to instruct the children of Israel regarding all the statutes which the Lord has spoken to them through Moshe. And Moshe spoke to Aaron and his surviving sons, Eleazar and Itamar, take the meal offering that is left over from the Lord's fire offerings, and eat it as unleavened loaves beside the altar, for it is a holy of holies. You shall eat it in a holy place, because it is your portion and your sons' portion from the Lord's fire offerings, for so I have been commanded. The breast of the waving and the thigh of the raising up you shall eat in a clean place, you and your sons and your daughters with you, for as your portion and your sons' portion they have been given, from the peace offerings of the children of Israel. They shall bring the thigh of the raising up and the breast of the waving upon the fats for the fire offerings, to wave as a waving before the Lord, and it shall belong to you and to your sons with you as an eternal due, as the Lord has commanded. And Moshe thoroughly investigated concerning the sin offering he-goat, and behold, it had been burnt. So he was angry with Eleazar and Itamar, Aaron's surviving sons, saying, Why did you not eat the sin offering in the holy place? For it is holy of holies, and Adonai has given it to you to gain forgiveness for the sin of the community, to effect their atonement before the Lord. Behold, its blood was not brought into the sanctuary within, so you should have surely eaten it within holy precincts, as I commanded. And Aaron spoke to Moshe, But today did they offer up their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord? But if tragic events like these had befallen me, and if I had eaten a sin offering today, would it have pleased the Lord? Moshe heard this, and it pleased him. And the Lord spoke to Moshe and Aaron to say to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the creatures that you may eat amongst all the animals on earth. Any animal that has a cloven hoof that is completely split into double hooves, and which brings up its cud, that one you may eat. But these you shall not eat amongst those that bring up the cud and those that have a cloven hoof. The camel, because it brings up its cud, but does not have a completely cloven hoof, it is unclean for you. And the hyrax, because it brings up its cud, but will not have a completely cloven hoof, it is unclean for you. And the hare, because it brings up its cud, but does not have a completely cloven hoof, it is unclean for you. And the pig, because it has a cloven hoof that is completely split, but will not regurgitate its cud, it is unclean for you. You shall not eat of their flesh, and you shall not touch their carcasses, they are unclean for you. Amongst all creatures that are in the water you may eat these. Any of the creatures in the water that has fins and scales, those you may eat, whether it lives in the waters, in the seas, or in the rivers. But any creatures that do not have fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, amongst all the creeping creatures in the water, and amongst all living creatures that live in the water, are an abomination for you. And they shall be an abomination for you. You shall not eat of their flesh, and their dead bodies you shall hold in abomination. Any creature that does not have fins and scales in the water is an abomination for you. And amongst birds you shall hold these in abomination. They shall not be eaten, they are an abomination. The eagle or the griffin vulture, the kite, the osprey, the kestrel, and the vulture after its species, and the raven after its species, the ostrich, the jay, and the sparrowhawk, and the goshawk, the goshawk after its species, the owl, the gull, the little owl, the bat, the starling, the magpie, the stork, the heron after its species, the hoopoe, and the atalef bat. Any flying insect that walks on four is an abomination for you. However, amongst all the flying insects that walk on four legs, you may eat from those that have jointed legs like extensions above its regular legs, with which they hop on the ground. From this locust category you may eat the following: the red locust after its species, the yellow locust after its species, the spotted gray locust after its species, and the white locust after its species. But on any other flying insect that has four legs is an abomination for you. But any other flying insect that has four legs is an abomination for you. And through these you will become unclean. Anyone who touches their dead bodies will be unclean until evening. And anyone who carries their carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. Any animal that has a cloven hoof that is not completely split, and which does not bring up its cud, is unclean for you. Anyone who touches them shall become unclean. And amongst all the animals that walk on four legs, any animal that walks on its paws is unclean for you. Anyone who touches their carcass will be unclean until evening. And one who carries their carcass shall immerse his garments, and he will be unclean until evening. They are unclean for you. And this is unclean for you amongst creeping creatures that creep on the ground, the weasel, the mouse, and the toad after its species, the hedgehog, the chameleon, the lizard, the snail, and the mole. These are the ones that are unclean for you amongst all the creeping creatures. Anyone who touches them when they are dead will be unclean until evening. And if any of these dead creatures falls upon anything, it will be unclean, whether it is any wooden vessel, garment, hide, or sack, any vessel with which work is done. It shall be immersed in water, but will remain unclean until evening, and it will be clean. But any earthenware vessel into whose interior any of them falls, whatever is inside it shall become unclean, and you shall break the vessel itself. Of any food that is usually eaten, upon which water comes, will become unclean, and any beverage that is usually drunk, which is in any vessel, shall become unclean. And anything upon which any of their carcasses of these animals fall will become unclean. Thus an oven or stove shall be demolished, they are unclean, and they shall be unclean for you. But a spring or a cistern, a gathering of water, remains clean. However, one who touches their carcass shall become unclean. And if of their carcass falls upon any sowing seed which is to be sown, it remains clean. But if water is put upon seeds, and any of their carcass falls on them, they are unclean for you. If an animal that you normally eat dies, one who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. And one who eats of its carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. And one who carries its carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. And any creeping creature that creeps on the ground is an abomination, it shall not be eaten. Any creature that goes on its belly, and any creature that walks on 4 legs, to any creature that has many legs, amongst all creeping creatures that creep on the ground, you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. You shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping creature that creeps, and you shall not defile yourselves with them, that you should become unclean through them. For I am the Lord your God, and you shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, because I am holy, and you shall not defile yourselves through any creeping creature that crawls on the ground. For I am the Lord who has brought you out from the land of Egypt to be your God. Thus you shall be holy, because I am holy. This is the law regarding animals, birds, and all living creatures that move in water, and all creatures that creep on the ground, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten. Bhagavad Gita, Akshara Brahma Yogehe, número 8. Arjuna said, "What is Brahman? What is the individual soul? And what is action, O Supreme Person? What is it that is said to underlie all the elements? And what is it that is said to underlie all the angels? And who, O Madhusadana, sustains all the sacrifices here in the body? And in what way? And how again are you to be known at the time of death by those who have practiced self-control?" Sri Krishna said, "Brahman is the imperishable, the supreme. Dwelling in each body, Brahman is called the individual soul. The offering of the oblation, which brings into existence all beings and supports them, is called action. That which underlies all the elements is the perishable entity, and that which underlies all the angels is the Purusha, the cosmic spirit. And Brahman, who sustains all the sacrifices, is myself here in the body, O best of men. And whoso at the time of death leaves his body remembering me alone and goes forth, he attains my being. Concerning this there is no doubt. For whatever object a man thinks of at the final moment when he leaves his body, that alone does he attain, O son of Kunti, being ever absorbed in the thought thereof. Therefore at all times constantly remember me and fight. With your mind and understanding absorbed in me, you will surely come to me. Engaged in the yoga of constant practice and not allowing the mind to wander away to anything else, He who meditates on the supreme resplendent Purusha reaches Brahman, O son of Prita. He who at the time of passing away, steady in mind, filled with love, and armed with the strength of yoga, well fixes his prana between his brows and meditates on the omniscient and primal being, the ruler, the dispenser of all, who is subtler than an atom, whose form is beyond comprehension, and who, like the glorious soleil, is beyond all darkness. He who thus meditates reaches the resplendent supreme person. I will now briefly describe to you that state which those who know the Vedas call the imperishable, and into which enter the sannyasis, self-controlled and free from attachment, and in desire for which seekers lead the life of continence. He who closes all the doors of the senses, confines the mind within the heart, draws the prana into the head, and engages the practice of yoga, uttering Om, the single syllable denoting Brahman, and meditates on me. He who so departs, leaving the body, attains the supreme goal. I am easy of access to that ever steadfast yogi who, O Partha, constantly meditates on me and gives no thought to anything else. Having come to me, these high-souled men are no further subject to rebirth, which is transitory and the abode of pain, for they have reached the highest perfection. The dwellers in all the worlds from the realm of Brahma downwards are subject to rebirth, O Arjuna. But for those who reach me, O son of Kunti, there is no further return to embodiment. Those who know that the day of Brahma lasts 1,000 eons and that the night of Brahma lasts 1,000 eons again are indeed people who know day and night. At the approach of the day, all manifest objects come forth from the unmanifested, and at the approach of the night they merge again into that which is called the unmanifested. The same multitude of beings coming forth again and again, merge in spite of themselves, O Partha, at the approach of the night, and re-manifest themselves at the approach of the day. But beyond this unmanifested, there is yet another unmanifested, eternal being, who does not perish when all beings perish. This unmanifested is called the imperishable. It is said to be the ultimate goal, from which those who reach it never come back. That is my supreme abode. That supreme Purusha, in whom all beings abide and by whom the entire universe is pervaded, can be attained, O Partha, by whole-souled devotion directed to Brahman alone. Now I'll tell you, O greatest of the Bharatas, the time in which the yogis depart never to return, and also the time in which they depart to return. Fire, light, daytime, the bright half of the moon, and the 6 months of the northward passage of the soleil. Taking this path, the knowers of Brahman go to Brahman. Smoke, night, the dark half of the moon, and the 6 months of the southward passage of the soleil. Take this path. The yogi reaches the lunar path and thence returns. These two paths, the bright and the dark, are deemed to be the world's eternal paths. Following the one, a man does not come back, and following the other, he is reborn. No yogi who understands these two paths is ever deluded. Therefore, O Arjuna, at all times be steadfast in yoga. The yogi who knows this transcends all the rewards laid down for the study of the Vedas, for sacrifices, for austerities, for making gifts. He reaches the supreme primal abode. Digha Mahaparnabhana Sutta número 16:6. Then the Gracious One addressed Venerable Ananda, saying, It may be, Ananda, that some of you may think in this way. Past is the teacher's word, there is now no teacher for us. But it should not be seen like that, Ananda. Whatever dharma and discipline has been taught by me or laid down, Ananda, that is your teacher after my passing. At present, Ananda, the monks address each other with the word friend, but after my passing away they are not to address one another thus. The elder monk, Ananda, should address the younger monk by his name, or by his clan name, or by the word friend. But the younger monk should address the elder monk as Reverend Sir or Venerable Sir. Desiring to do so, Ananda, the community, the Sangha, after my passing away, can abolish the minor and subsidiary training rules. The highest penalty, Ananda, after my passing away is to be handed out to the monk Chana. But what, sir, what is the highest penalty, reverend sir? The monk Chana, Ananda, may say whatever he wishes, but he is not to be spoken to or advised or instructed by the monks. Then the gracious one addressed the monks, saying, It may be, monks, that for one of the monks there is doubt or confusion about the Buddha, or about the Dharma, or about the Sangha, or about the path, or about the practice. Ask, monks, do not be regretful later, thinking the teacher was face to face with us, and we didn't ask the gracious one directly about the training. After this was said, those monks were silent. After this was said, those monks were silent. For a second time, the gracious one addressed the monks, saying, It may be, monks, that for one of the monks there is doubt or confusion about the Buddha, or about the Dharma, or about the Sangha, or about the path, or about the practice. Ask, monks, do not be regretful later, thinking the teacher was face to face with us and we didn't ask the gracious one directly about the training. For a second time, those monks were silent. For a third time, the gracious one addressed the monks, saying, It may be, monks, that for one of the monks there is doubt or confusion about the Buddha, or about the Dharma, or about the Sangha, or about the path, or about the practice. Ask, monks, do not be regretful later, thinking the teacher was face to face with us and we didn't ask the gracious one directly about the training. For a third time, those monks were silent. Then the gracious one addressed the monks, saying, It may be, monks, that out of respect for the teacher you do not ask. Then one friend, monks, can inform another friend about his doubts. After this was said, those monks were silent. Then Venerable Nanda said this to the gracious one. It is wonderful, reverend sir. It is marvelous, reverend sir. I am confident, reverend sir, in that this Sangha of monks, there is not one of the monks in this community of monks who has doubt or confusion about the Buddha, or about the Dharma, or about the Sangha, or about the path, or about the practice. Out of confidence, Ananda, you speak, but the realized one, Ananda, has knowledge that there is not one of the monks in this community of monks who has doubt or confusion about the Buddha, or about the Dharma, or about the Sangha, or about the path, or about the practice. For amongst these 500 monks, Ananda, he who is the last monk, is a stream enterer, no longer subject to falling into lower realms, and has a fixed destiny ending in final awakening. Then the gracious one addressed the monks, saying, Come now, monks, for I tell you, all conditioned things that are subject to decay strive on with heedfulness. These were the last words of the realized one. Then the gracious one attained the first absorption, and after emerging from the first absorption, he has attained the second absorption, and after emerging from the second absorption, he attained the third absorption, and after emerging from the third absorption, he attained the fourth absorption, and after emerging from the fourth absorption, he attained the sphere of endless space, and after emerging from the sphere of endless space, he attained the sphere of endless consciousness, and after emerging from the sphere of endless consciousness, he attained the sphere of nothingness. And after emerging from the sphere of nothingness, he attained the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. And after emerging from the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, he attained the cessation of perception and feeling. Then Venerable Nanda said this to Venerable Anuruddha. Has the gracious one, Reverend Anuruddha, attained final emancipation? The gracious one, Reverend Ananda, has not attained final emancipation. He has attained the cessation of perfection and feeling. Then the gracious one, after emerging from the cessation of perception and feeling, attained the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. And after emerging from the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, he attained the sphere of nothingness. And after emerging from the sphere of nothingness, he attained the sphere of endless consciousness. And after emerging from the sphere of endless consciousness, he attained the sphere of endless space. And after emerging from the sphere of endless space, he attained the fourth absorption. And after emerging from the fourth absorption, he attained the third absorption, and after emerging from the third absorption, he attained the second absorption, and after emerging from the second absorption, he attained the first absorption, and after emerging from the first absorption, he attained the second absorption, and after emerging from the second absorption, he attained the third absorption, and after emerging from the third absorption, he attained the fourth absorption, and after completing the fourth absorption, he immediately After emerging from the fourth absorption, immediately the Gracious One attained final emancipation. When the Gracious One attained final emancipation, along with emancipation there was a great earthquake and an awful, horrifying crash of the angel's thunder drum. When the Gracious One attained final emancipation, along with the emancipation, Brahma Sahampati spoke this verse. All beings in the world will surely lay aside the body in the same way the teacher, such like unmatched in the world, the realizer one attained to the transcendent strengths, the Sambuddha, has attained final emancipation. When the Gracious One attained final emancipation, along with the emancipation, Saka, the master of the angels, spoke this verse. And permanent indeed are all processes. Arisen, they have the nature to decay. After rising, they come to cessation. The stilling of them is blissful. When the Gracious One attained final emancipation, along with the emancipation of Venerable Anuruddha, spoke these verses. There is no further breathing for that such like one of steady mind. Free from lust, the sage who has died has entered the peace of Nirvana. With an unshaken heart, he endured the painful feelings like a flame when it goes out, so his mind was liberated in Nirvana. When the Gracious One attained final emancipation, along with the emancipation of Venerable Ananda, spoke this verse. With that there was fear, with that there was horror, when the Sambuddha, endowed with all noble qualities, attained emancipation. When the Gracious One attained final emancipation, those monks there who were not free from passion, throwing up their arms, falling down as though cut down, rolling backwards and forwards as though with their feet cut off, were crying, "Too quickly the Gracious One has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the Fortunate One has attained final emancipation. Too quickly has the visionary in the world has disappeared." But those monks who were free from passion, mindful with full awareness, endured, thinking, and permanent are all processes, how can it be otherwise? Then Venerable Anuruddha said this to the monks. Enough, friends, do not grieve, do not lament. Were you not warned by the Gracious One when he declared, there is alteration in, separation from, and changeability in all that is dear and appealing? How can it be otherwise, friends? For that which is obtained, born, become, in process, subject to dissolution. It is not possible to say this. It should not be dissolved. The angels' friends are complaining, but what beings are angels? Is the Venerable Anuruddha thinking of? They are, friend Ananda, angels in the sky, perceiving the earth, who having disheveled hair are weeping, throwing away their arms, falling down as though cut down, rolling backwards and forwards as though with their feet cut off, crying, Too quickly the Gracious One has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the Fortunate One has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the visionary in the world has disappeared. There are, friend Ananda, angels on the earth, perceiving the earth, who having disheveled hair and weeping, throwing up their arms, falling down as though cut down, rolling down and backwards as though with their feet cut off, crying, Too quickly the Gracious One has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the Fortunate One has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the visionary in the world has disappeared. But those angels who have cut off passion, they mindfully with full awareness endure, thinking, and permanent all processes, how can it be otherwise? The Venerable Anuruddha and Venerable Ananda spend the rest of the night in talk about the Dharma. Then Venerable Anuruddha addressed the Venerable Ananda, saying, Go, Ananda, and after entertaining Kusinara, inform the Palis, the Mallas of Kusinara, saying, The Gracious One has attained emancipation. Vesetas, now is the time for whatever you are thinking. Very well, Reverend Sir, said Venerable Ananda, and after replying to the Venerable Anuruddha, dressing in the matin time, and taking his robes and bowl, he entered Kusinara with a companion. Now at that time the mullahs from Kusinara were assembled in the council hall having some business or other. Then Venerable Nanda approached the mullahs of Kusinara in the council hall, and after approaching he informed the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, "The gracious one has attained emancipation, Vasetas. Now is the time for whatever you are thinking." After hearing this word from Venerable Nanda, the mullahs, the sons of the mullahs, the daughters-in-law of the mullahs, and the wives of the mullahs became miserable, depressed, with their minds given over to suffering. Some, having disheveled hair, were weeping, throwing up their arms, falling down as though cut down, rolling backwards and forwards as though with their feet cut off they were crying. Too quickly the gracious one has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the fortunate one has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the visionary in the world has disappeared. Then the mullahs from Kusinara ordered their men, saying, "Now, friends, gather together perfume and flowers and all the musicians in Kusinara." And the mullahs of Kusinara, having taken perfumes and garlands and all the musicians and 500 pairs of clothes, approached the mullahs Salwood at the Upavatana and the gracious one's body. After approaching the gracious one's body through honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the body with dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, and making cloth canopies and preparing circular pavilions, they made the day pass. Then this occurred to the mullahs of Kusinara: "Today it is too late for the gracious one. Mañana will be burn the gracious one's body." Then the mullahs of Kusinara, through honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body with dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, and making cloth canopies and preparing circular pavilions, they made the second day pass. They made the third day pass. They made the fourth day pass. They made the fifth day pass. They made the sixth day pass. Then on the seventh day this occurred to the mullahs of Kusinara. Whilst honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body with dance, song, and music, garlands, and perfumes, after taking it out of the city by the south, on the outside of the city to the south, we will burn the gracious one's body. Now at that time the 8 leaders of the mullahs, having washed their heads and put on clean clothes, said, "Let us lift the gracious one's body," but they were not able to lift it. Then the mullahs of Kusinara said this to Venerable Anuruddha: "What is the reason, Anuruddha, that what is the cause by which 8 leaders of the mullahs, having washed their hands and put on their clean clothes, and saying, let us lift the gracious one's body, are not able to lift it? You Vasetas have one intention, and the angels have another intention." But what is the angel's intention, Reverend Sir? Your intention, Vaseta, is what we, whilst honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body with dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, after taking it out of the city by the south, on the outside of the city to the south, will burn the gracious one's body. The angel's intention, Vaseta, is whilst we honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body with the angels' dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, after carrying it to the north of the city by the north, and re-entering the city by the north gate, and carrying it to the middle of the city by the middle, and going out by the eastern gate to east of the city at the mullah's shrine, called the bonded coronet, there let us burn the gracious one's body. Let us do according to the angel's intention, Reverend Sir. Now at that time the whole of Kusinara, including the dirty rubbish heaps, was covered knee-deep with divine coral tree flowers. Then the angels of the mullahs of Kusinara, whilst honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body with the angels, and men's dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, after carrying it to the north of the city by the north, and re-entering the city by the north gate, they carrying it to the middle of the city by the middle, and going out by the eastern gate to the east of the city, at the mullah's shrine called the bonded coronet, there set down the gracious one's body. Then the mullahs of Kusinara said this to Venerable Ananda: "How do we act, Reverend Ananda, in regard to the realized one's body? As you act, Vasita, in regard to the universal monarch's body, so you should act in regards to the realized one's body." "But how do we act, Reverend Sir, in regards to the universal monarch's body?" They wrap the universal monarch's body, Veseta, with clean cloth, and after wrapping it with clean cloth, they wrap with carded cotton, and after wrapping with carded cotton, they wrap with clean cloth. By this means, after wrapping the universal monarch's body with 500 portions of cloth and cotton, enclosing it in an oiled tub made of iron, and enclosing it in another iron tub, and putting it on a scented funeral pyre, they burn the universal monarch's body, and they build a shrine for the universal monarch at the crossroads. So they act, Vesetas, in regard to a universal monarch's body, just as they act. Veseta in regard to a universal monarch's body, so should they act in regard to a realized one's body, and a shrine should be made for the realized one at the crossroads. Then the Mallas of Kusinara, through honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body with dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, and making cloth canopies and preparing circular pavilions, they made the second day pass, they made the third day pass, they made the fourth day pass, they made the fifth day pass, they made the sixth day pass. Then on the seventh day this occurred to the Mallas of Kusinara. Whilst honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body with dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, after taking it out of the city by the south on the outside of the city to the south, we will burn the gracious one's body. Now at that time 8 leaders of the Mallas, having washed their heads and put on clean clothes, said, "Let us lift the gracious one's body," but they were not able to lift it. Then the Mallas of Kusinara said this to Venerable Anuruddha. What is the reason, Anuruddha? What is the cause why 8 leaders of the Mallas, having washed their heads and put on clean clothes, and saying, "Let us lift the gracious one's body," are not able to lift it? You Vesetas have one intention, and the angels have another intention. What is the angel's intention, Reverend Sir? Your intention, Veseta, is we, whilst honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body, with dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, after taking it out of the city by the south, on the outside of the city to the south, will burn the gracious one's body. The angel's intention, Veseta, is we, whilst honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body, with the angel's dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, after carrying it to the north of the city by the north, and re-entering the city by the north gate, and carrying it into the middle of the city by the middle, and going out by the eastern gate to the east of the city, at the Mallas shrine called the Bonded Cornet. There let us burn the gracious one's body. Let us do according to the angel's intention, Reverend Sir. Now at that time, the whole of Kusinara, including the dirty rubbish heaps, was covered knee-deep with divine coral tree flowers. Then the angel of the Mallas of Kusinara, whilst honoring, respecting, revering, and honoring the gracious one's body with the angels, amended dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes, after carrying it to the north of the city by the north, and re-entering the city by the north gate, and carrying it to the middle of the city by the middle, and going out by the eastern gate to the east of the city, at the Mallas shrine called the Bonded Cornet, they set down the gracious one's body. Then the Mallas of Kusinara said this to Venerable Ananda. How do we act, Venerable Ananda, in regard to the realized one's body? As you act, Vesetas, in regard to the universal monarch's body, so should you act in regard to the realized one's body. But how do we act, Reverend Ananda, in regard to the universal monarch's body? They wrap the universal monarch's body, Vesetas, with clean cloth, and after wrapping it with clean cloth, they wrap with carded cotton, and after wrapping with carded cotton, they wrap with clean cloth. By this means, after wrapping the universal monarch's body with 500 pairs of cloth and cotton, enclosing it in an oil tub made of iron, and enclosing it in another iron tub, and putting it on a scented funeral pyre, they burn the universal monarch's body, and they build a shrine for the universal monarch at the crossroads. So they act, Vesetas, in regard to a universal monarch's body. Just as they act, Vesetas, in regards to a universal monarch's body, so should they act in regard to a realized one's body. And a shrine should be made for the realized one at the crossroads. Whoever there prepares flowers, incense, or powder, or honors, or establishes confidence in his mind, that will be for their benefit and happiness for a long time. Then the Mallas of Kusinara gave orders to their men, saying, "If it is so then wrap the body with the Mallas' carded cloth friends." Then the Mallas of Kusinara wrapped the Gracious One's body with clean cloth, and after wrapping with clean cloth, they wrapped with carded cotton, and after wrapping with carded cotton, they wrapped with clean cloth. And by this means, after wrapping the Gracious One's body with 500 pairs of cloth and cotton, enclosing it on an oiled tub made of iron, and enclosing it in another iron tub, and putting it on a scented funeral pyre, they put the Gracious One's body on the funeral pyre. The story concerning Mahakasapa. Now at that time, the Venerable Mahakasapa was traveling along the highway from Prava to Kusinara, together with a great sangha of monks, around 500 monks. The Venerable Mahakasapa, after descending from the path, sat down at the root of a certain tree. Now at that time, a certain Ajivaka, whilst holding a Mandarava flower from Kusinara, was traveling along the highway to Pava. Venerable Mahakasapa saw that Ajivaka approaching from a distance, and after seeing him, he said this to that Ajivaka: "Do you know our teacher, friend?" "Certainly, friend, I do. Today is 7 days since the final emancipation of the ascetic Gautama. Therefore, I am holding this Mandarava flower." Then those monks who were not free from passions, some throwing up their arms, were weeping, falling down as though cut down, rolling backwards and forwards as though with their feet cut off. They were crying, "Too quickly the gracious one has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the fortunate one has attained final emancipation. Too quickly the visionary in the world has disappeared." But those monks who were free from passion mindfully, with full awareness, endured thinking, impermanence are all processes. How can it be otherwise? Now at that time, one who had gone forth in old age, named Subhadda, was sitting in that group. Then Subhadda had gone forth in the old age, said this to those monks: "Enough, friends, do not grieve, do not lament. We are now freed from that troublesome great ascetic saying, 'This is allowable for you, this is not allowable for you.' But now we will do whatever we wish, and we will not do whatever we do not wish." Then Venerable Mahakasapa addressed the monks, saying, "Enough, friends, do not grieve, do not lament. Were you not warned by the Gracious One, friends, when he declared this? There is alternation and separation from, and changeability in all that is dear and appealing. How can it be otherwise, friends? For that which is obtained, born, become, in process, subject to dissolution, it is not possible to say this. It should not dissolve." Now at that time, 4 leaders of the Mallas, having washed their heads and put on clean clothes, said, "Let us burn the Gracious One's funeral pyre," but they were not able to burn it. Then the Mallas of Kusinara said this to Venerable Anuruddha: "What is the reason, Venerable Anuruddha? What is the cause why 4 leaders of the Mallas, having washed their heads and put on clean clothes, and saying, 'Let us burn the Gracious One's funeral pyre,' are not able to burn it?" "The angels have another intention," Vaisetas. "But what is the angel's intention, reverend sir?" "The angel's intention, Vaisetas, is the Venerable Mahakasapa is traveling along the highway from Palva to Kusinara, together with a great sangha of monks, about 500 monks. The Gracious One's funeral pyre will not burn whilst Venerable Mahakasapa has not honored the Gracious One's feet with his head. Let us do according to the angel's intention, reverend sir." Then Venerable Mahakasapa approached Kusinara and the Mallas' shrine, called the Bonded Coronet, and the Gracious One's funeral pyre, and after approaching and arranging his robe on one shoulder, extending his hands in respectful salutation, and circumambulating the funeral pyre 3 times, and uncovering the feet, he honored the Gracious One's feet with his head. Also 500 monks, after arranging their robes on one shoulder, extending their hands in respectful salutation, and circumambulating the funeral pyre 3 times, honored the Gracious One's feet with their heads. After the Gracious One's feet had been honored by Venerable Mahakasapa and by 500 monks, the funeral pyre caught fire by itself. Now whilst the Gracious One's body was burning, of the outer skin, the inner skin, the flesh, the sinews, the synovial fluid, neither charcoal was evident, nor was ash of the body left over. Just as whilst ghee or oil is burning, there is no charcoal and no ash evident, so when the Gracious One's body was burning, out of the outer skin and the inner skin, the flesh, the sinews, the synovial fluid, neither charcoal was evident, nor was ash of the body left over. Only 2 of those 500 pairs of clothes were not consumed, that on the inside and that on the outside. When the Gracious One was burnt, a shower of water appeared in the sky, and the Gracious One's funeral pyre was extinguished. Also, after water rose from a well, the Gracious One's funeral pyre was extinguished. Also, the mullahs of Kusinara from Kusinara extinguished the gracious one's funeral pyre with all types of fragrant water. Then the mullahs of Kusinara, after making an enclosure of spears in the council hall and surrounding the gracious one's body relics with bows, honored, respected, revered, and honored it with dance, song, music, garlands, and perfumes. The Magadan King Ajatasattu, the son of Lady Wisdom, heard, the gracious one, it seems, has attained final emancipation in Kusinara. Then the Magadan King Ajatasattu, the son of Lady Wisdom, sent a message to the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, the gracious one was a noble, and I also am a noble. I am worthy of a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. I will make a shrine and hold a festival for the bodily relics. Then the Lokavis of Vesali heard, the gracious one, it seems, has attained final emancipation in Kusinara. Then the Lokavis of Vesali sent a message to the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, the gracious one was a noble, and we also are nobles. We are worthy of a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. We will make a shrine and hold a festival for the bodily relics. Then the Sakyas of Kapilavatu heard, the gracious one, it seems, has attained final emancipation in Kusinara. Then the Sakyas of Kapilavatu sent a message to the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, the gracious one was our foremost relative. We are worthy of a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. We will make a shrine and hold a festival for the bodily relics. Then the Bullahs of Alakapa heard, the gracious one, it seems, has attained final emancipation in Kusinara. Then the Bullahs of Alakapa sent a message to the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, the gracious one was noble, and we also are nobles. We are worthy of a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. We will make a shrine and hold a festival for the bodily relics. Then the Kolyas of Ramagama heard, the gracious one, it seems, has attained final emancipation in Kusinara. Then the Kolyas of Ramagama sent a message to the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, the gracious one was a noble, and we also are nobles. We are worthy of a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. We will make a shrine and hold a festival for the bodily relics. Then the Brahmin Veta Dipaka heard, the gracious one, it seems, has attained final emancipation in Kusinara. Then the Brahmin Veta Dipaka sent a message to the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, the gracious one was a noble, and I am a Brahmin. I am worthy of a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. I will make a shrine and hold a festival for the bodily relics. Then the mullahs of Pava heard, the gracious one, it seems, has attained final emancipation in Kusinara. Then the mullahs of Pava sent a message to the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, the gracious one was a noble, and we also are nobles. We are worthy of a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. We will make a shrine and hold a festival for the bodily relics. After this was said, the mullahs of Kusinara said this to their community and group. The gracious one has attained final emancipation in the area of our village, but we will not see a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. After this was said, the Brahmin Dona said this to their community and group. Listen, dear sirs, to a sentence of mine. Our Buddha was one who spoke about forbearance. It is not benevolent that there should be a battle about sharing the relics of the best man. Let us unite and concord, dear sirs, with joyful minds, make 8 shares of the relics, and set up shrines in every direction so that many people may gain faith in the visionary one. Now, Brahmin, you must divide the gracious one's bodily relics in 8 equal divisions. Certainly, dear sir, said Dona the Brahmin, and after replying to that Sangha and group, and dividing the gracious one's bodily relics in 8 equal divisions, he said to that Sangha and group, please give me this sum, dear sirs, and I will make a shrine and hold a festival for the sun. Please give me this urn, dear sirs, and I also will make a shrine and hold a festival for the urn. They gave him the urn to Dona the Brahmin. Then the Mariah of Pepperwood heard, the gracious one, it seems, has attained final emancipation in Kusinara. Then the Mariah of Pepperwood sent a message to the mullahs of Kusinara, saying, the gracious one was a noble, and we also are nobles. We are worthy of a share of the gracious one's bodily relics. We will make a shrine and hold a festival for the bodily relics. There are no further portions of the gracious one's relics. Instead, take the ashes from the gracious one's body. Therefore, they took away the ashes. Then the Magadan King Ajatasattu, the son of Lady Wisdom, made a shrine for the gracious one's bodily relics at Rajagaha and held a festival. The Lokavis from Vesali made a shrine for the gracious one's bodily relics at Vesali and held a festival. The Sakyas from Kapilavatu made a shrine for the gracious one's bodily relics at Kapilavatu and held a festival. The Bullahs of Alakapa made a shrine for the gracious one's bodily relics and at Alakapa and held a great festival. The Kolyas of Ramagama made a shrine for the gracious one's bodily relics at Ramagama and held a festival. The Veta Dipaka Brahmin made a shrine for the gracious one's bodily relics at Veta Dipa and held a festival. The Mallas of Pava made a shrine for the gracious one's bodily relics at Pava and held a festival. The Mallas of Kusinara made a shrine for the gracious one's bodily relics at Kusinara and held a festival. The Dona Brahmin made a shrine for the urn and held a festival. The Marias of Pepperwood made a shrine for the ashes at Pepperwood and held a festival. Thus there were 8 shrines for the bodily relics. The urn shrine was the 9th, and the ashes shrine was the 10th, and so it was in former times. There were 8 measures of the visionary's relics. 7 measures are honored in Jambutipa. 1 measure of the most noble man, the sovereign of the dragons, honors in Ramagama. 1 tooth is honored in the heavens, and 1 is honored in the city of Gandhara. A further one is the realm of the Kalinga king, and the king of the dragons honors 1 further. Through the power of these relics, this lovely earth is decorated like a most excellent hall. Thus, this body of the visionary one is well established by those who respect the respectable. Honored by masters of angels, masters of dragons, and kings, the relics are honored by true masters of men. Honor those relics after holding up your hands. A Buddha is rare even in 100 eons. Together 40 even teeth, the hair, and body hair relics were carried off successively by the angels to various universes. Gospels, Luke 7-8. When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jewish brethren to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not distant from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Master, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you, but say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of a Moor, and she was a widow, and a large crowd from the town was with her. When the master saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Then he went up and touched the bier they were carrying him on, and the bearers stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his Moor. They were all filled with awe and praised God. "A great prophet has appeared amongst us," they said. "God has come to help God's people." This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. John's disciples told him about all these things, calling 2 of them. He sent them to the master to ask, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" When the men came to Jesus, they said, "John the Baptist sent us to you to ask, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" At that very time, Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the benevolent news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." After John's messengers left, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No. Those who wear expensive clothes and indulge in luxury are in palaces. But what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes. I tell you, and further than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you. I tell you, amongst those born of women there is no one greater than John, yet the one who is least in the sovereignty of God is greater than he. All the people, even the tax collectors, when they heard Jesus' words, acknowledged that God's way was right because they had been baptized by John. But the Pharisees and the experts in the law rejected God's purpose for themselves because they had not been baptized by John. Jesus went on to say, To what then can I compare the people of this generation? What are they like? They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling out to each other, We played with a pipe for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not cry. For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say he is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by all her children. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii, the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him further? Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. Then he turned towards the woman, and said to Simon, Do you see this woman? I came to you into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Then Jesus said to her, Your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say amongst themselves, Who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. After this, Jesus traveled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the benevolent news of the sovereignty of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means. Whilst a large crowd was gathering and people were coming to Jesus from town after town, he told this parable. A tiller went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, it was trampled on, and the birds ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground, and when it came up, the plants withered because they had no moisture. Other seed fell amongst thorns, which grew up with it and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on benevolent soil. It came up and yielded a crop 100 times further than what was sown. When he said this, he called out, Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. His disciples asked him what this parable meant. He said, The knowledge of the secrets of the sovereignty of God has been given to you, but to others I speak in parables, so that though seeing they may not see, though hearing they may not understand. This is the meaning of the parable. The seed is the word of God. Those along the path are the ones who hear, and then the devil comes and takes away the word from their hearts, so that they may not believe and be saved. Those on the rocky ground are the ones who receive the word with joy when they hear it, but they have no root. They believe for a while, but in the time of testing they fall away. The seed that fell amongst thorns stands for those who hear, but as they go on their way they are choked by life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and they do not mature. But the seed on benevolent soil stands for those who, with a noble and benevolent heart, who hear the word, retain it, and by persevering produce a crop. No one lights a lamp and hides it in a clay jar or puts it under a bed. Instead, they put it on a stand so that those who come in can see the light. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Therefore consider carefully how you listen. Whoever has will be given further. Whoever does not have, even what they think they have, will be taken from them. Now Jesus' mother and brothers came to see him, but they were not able to get near him because of the crowd. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to see you." He replied, "My mother and my brothers are those who hear God's word and put it into practice." One day Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and set out. As they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters, and the storm subsided and all was calm. "Where is your faith, Jesus?" He asked his disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him." They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want to do? What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, because they were overcome with fear. So he got into a boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over the town how much Jesus had done for him. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace." While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Don't bother the teacher any further." Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe and she will be healed." When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and more. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and grieving for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. Quran, Surah Al-Qasas. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Ta Sin Min. These are the verses of the book that makes things clear. We rehearse to them some of the story of Moshe and Pharaoh in truth for people who believe. Truly, Pharaoh elated himself in the land and broke up its people into sections, depressing a small group amongst them. Their sons he slew, but he kept alive their females, for he was indeed a maker of mischief. And we wish to be gracious to those who were being depressed in the land, to make them leaders in faith and make them heirs, to establish a firm place for them in the land, and to show Pharaoh, Haman, and their hosts at their hands the very things against which they were taking precautions. So we sent this inspiration to the more of Moshe. Suckle thy child, but when thou hast fears about him, cast him into the river. But fear not, nor grieve, for we shall restore him to thee, and we shall make him one of our apostles. Then the people of Pharaoh picked him up from the river. It was intended that Moshe should be to them an adversary and a cause of sorrow, for Pharaoh and Haman and all their hosts were men of sin. The wife of Pharaoh said, Here is joy of the eye, for me and for thee. Slay him not. It may be that he will be use to us, or we may adopt him as a son. And they perceived not what they were doing, but there came to be a void in the heart of the more of Moshe. She was going almost to disclose his case, had we not strengthened her heart with faith, so that she might remain a firm believer. And she said to the sister of Moshe, Follow him. So she, the sister, watched him in the character of a stranger, and they knew not. And we ordained that he refused suck at first, until his sister came up and said, Shall I point out to you the people of a house that will nourish and bring him up for you, and be sincerely attached to him? Thus did we restore him to his more, that her eye might be comforted, that she might not grieve, and that she might know that the promise of Allah is true, but most of them do not understand. When he reached full age and was firmly established in life, we bestowed on him wisdom and knowledge, for thus do we reward those who do benevolence. And he entered the city at a time when its people were not watching, and he found there two men fighting, one of his own religion, and the other of his foes. Now the man of his own religion appealed to him against his foe, and Moshe struck him with his fist and made an end of him. He said, This is work of evil, Satan, for he is an enemy that manifestly misleads. He prayed, O my Lord, I have indeed wronged my soul. Do thou then forgive me. So Allah forgave him, for Allah is the all-forgiving, most merciful. He said, O my Lord, for that thou hast bestowed thy grace on me, never shall I be a help to those who sin. So he saw the Meta in the city, looking about in a state of fear, when behold, the man who had the day before sought his help called aloud for his help again. Moshe said to him, Thou art truly, it is clear, a quarrelsome fellow. Then he decided to lay hold of the man who was an enemy to both of them. That man said, O Moshe, is it thy intention to slay me as thou slewest a man yesterday? Thy intention is none other than to become a powerful, violent man in the land, and not to be one who sets things right. And there came a man running from the furthest end of the city. He said, O Moshe, the chiefs are taking counsel together about thee to slay thee. So get thee away, for I do give thee sincere advice. He therefore got away therefrom, looking about in a state of fear. He prayed, O my Lord, save me from people given to wrongdoing. Then when he turned his face towards the land of Madian, he said, I do hope that my Lord will show me the smooth and straight path. And when he arrived at the watering place in Madian, he found there a group of men watering their flocks, and besides them he found two women who were keeping back their flocks. He said, What is the matter with you? They said, We cannot water our flocks until the shepherds take back their flocks, and our father is a very old man. So he watered their flocks for them, and then he turned back to the shade and said, O my Lord, truly am I in desperate need of any benevolence that thou dost send me. Afterwards, one of the damsels came back to him, walking bashfully. She said, My father invites thee, that he may reward thee for having watered our flocks for us. So when he came to him and narrated the story, he said, Fear thou not, well hast thou escaped from unjust people. Said one of the damsels, O my dear father, engage him on wages. Truly the best of men for thee to employ is the man who is strong and trusty. He said, I intend to wed one of these my daughters to thee, on condition that thou serve me for 8 years. But if thou complete 10 years, it will be grace from thee. But I intend not to place thee under a difficulty. Thou wilt find me indeed, if Allah wills, one of the righteous. He said, Be that the agreement between me and thee, whichever of the two terms I fulfill, that there be no ill will to me. Be Allah witness to what we say. Now when Moshe had fulfilled the term and was traveling with his family, he perceived a fire in the direction of Mount Tur. He said to his family, Tarry ye, I perceive a fire. I hope to bring you from there some information or a burning firebrand, that ye may warm yourselves. But when he came to the fire, a voice was heard from the right bank of the valley, from a tree in hallowed ground. O Moshe, verily I am Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Now do thou throw thy rod. But when he saw it moving of its own accord, as if it had been a snake, he turned back in retreat and retraced not his steps. O Moshe, it was said, Draw near and fear not, for thou art of those who are secure. Move thy hand into thy bosom, and it will come forth white without stain or harm. And draw thy hand close to thy side to guard against fear. Those are the 2 credentials from thy Lord to Pharaoh and his chiefs, for truly they are a people rebellious and wicked. He said, O my Lord, I have slain a man amongst them, and I fear lest they slay me. And my brother Aaron is further eloquent in speech than I. So send him with me as a helper to confirm and strengthen me, for I fear that they may accuse me of falsehood. Allah said, We will certainly strengthen thy arm through thy brother, and invest you both with authority, so they shall not be able to touch you. With our sign shall ye triumph, you two as well as those who follow you. When Moshe came to them with our clear signs, they said, This is nothing but sorcery faked up. Never did we hear the like amongst our fathers of old. Moshe said, My Lord knows best who it is that comes with guidance from Allah, and whose end will be best in the hereafter. Certain it is that the wrongdoers will not prosper. Pharaoh said, O chiefs, no deity do I know for you but myself. Therefore, O Haman, light me a kiln to bake bricks out of clay, and build me a lofty palace, that I may mount up to the deity of Moshe. But as much as I am concerned, I think Moshe is a liar. And he was arrogant and insolent in the land beyond reason. He and his hosts, they thought that they would not have to return to us. So we seized him and his hosts, and we flung them into the sea. Now behold, what was the end of those who did wrong. And we made them but leaders, inviting to the fire. And on the day of judgment no help shall they find. In this world we made a curse to follow them, and on the day of judgment they will be amongst the loathed and despised. We did reveal to Moshe the book after we had destroyed the early generations, to give insight to men and guidance and mercy, that they might receive admonition. Thou wast not on the western side when we decreed the commission to Moshe, nor wast thou a witness of those events. But we raised up new generations, and long were the ages that passed over them. But thou wast not a dweller amongst the people of Madian, rehearsing our signs to them, but it is we who send apostles with inspiration. Nor wast thou at the side of the mountain of Tur when we called to Moshe, yet art thou sent as mercy from thy Lord to give warning to a people to whom no warner had come before thee, in order that they may receive admonition. If we had not sent thee to the Quraysh, in case a calamity should seize them for the deeds that their hands have sent forth, they might say, Our Lord, why didst thou not send us an apostle? We should then have followed thy signs and been amongst those who believe. But now when the truth has come to them from ourselves, they say, Why are not signs sent to him like those which were sent to Moshe? Do they not then reject the signs which were so formerly sent to Moshe? They say 2 kinds of sorcery, each assisting the other. And they say, For us we reject all such things. Say, Then bring ye a book from Allah, which is a better guide than either of them, that I may follow it. Do, if ye are truthful. But if they hearken not to thee, know that they only follow their own lusts, and who is further astray than one who follows his own lusts, devoid of guidance from Allah. For Allah guides not people given to wrongdoing. Now have we caused the word to reach them themselves, in order that they may receive admonition. Those to whom we sent the book before this, they do believe in this revelation. And when it is recited to them, they say, "We believe therein, for it is the truth from our Lord. Indeed, we have been Muslims bound to Allah's will from before this." Twice will they be given the reward for that they have persevered, that they avert evil with benevolence, and that they spend in charity out of what we have given them. And when they hear vain talk, they turn away therefrom and say, "To us our deeds, and to you yours. Peace be to you. We seek not the ignorant. It is true that thou wilt not be able to guide everyone whom thou lovest, but Allah guides those whom Allah will, and Allah knows best those who received guidance." They say, "If we were to follow the guidance with thee, we should be snatched away from our land. We have not established for them a secure sanctuary to which are brought as tribute fruits of all kinds, a provision from ourselves, but most of them understand not. And how many populations we destroyed, which exulted in their life of ease and plenty. Now those habitations of theirs after them are deserted, all but a miserable few, and we are their heirs. Nor was thy Lord the one to destroy a population until Allah had sent to it its center an apostle, rehearsing to them signs, nor are we going to destroy a population except when its members practice iniquity. The material things which ye are given are but the conveniences of this life, and the glitter thereof, but that which is with Allah is better and further enduring. Will ye not then be wise? Are these two alike? One to whom we have made a benevolent promise, and who is going to reach its fulfillment, and one to whom we have given the benevolent things of this life, but who on the day of judgment is to be amongst those who brought up for punishment. That day Allah will call to them and say, "Where are my partners, whom ye imagine to be such?" Those against whom the charge will be proved will say, "Our Lord, these are the ones whom we led astray. We led them astray as we were astray ourselves. We free ourselves from them in thy presence. It was not us they worshipped." It will be said to them, "Call upon your partners for help." They will call upon them, but they will not listen to them, and they will see the penalty before them, how they will wish, if only they had been open to guidance. That day Allah will call to them and say, "What was the answer you gave to the apostles?" Then the whole story of that day will seem obscure to them, like light to the blind, and they will not be able to even question each other. But any that in this life had repented, believed, and worked righteousness will have hopes to be amongst those who achieve salvation. Thy Lord does create and choose as Allah pleases. No choice have they in the matter. Glory to Allah, and distant is Allah above the partners they ascribe to Allah. And thy Lord knows all that their hearts conceal and all that they reveal. And to Allah is Allah. And Allah is Allah. There is no deity but Allah. To Allah be praise at the first and at the last, for Allah is the command, and to Allah shall ye all be brought back. Say, see ye, if Allah were to make the night perpetual over you to the day of judgment, what deity is there other than Allah who can give you enlightenment? Will ye not then hearken? Say, see ye, if Allah were to make the day perpetual over you to the day of judgment, what deity is there other than Allah who can give you a night in which ye can rest? Will ye not then see? It is out of Allah's mercy that Allah has made for you night and day, that ye may rest therein, and that ye may seek of Allah's grace, and in order that ye may be grateful. The day that Allah will call on them, Allah will say, "Where are my partners whom ye imagine to be such?" And from each people shall we draw a witness, and we shall say, Produce your proof. Then shall they know that the truth is in Allah alone, and the lies which they invented will leave them in the lurch. Qarun was doubtless of the people of Moshe, but he acted insolently towards them. Such were the treasures we had bestowed on him, that their very eyes would have been a burden to a body of strong men. Behold, his people said to him, Exalt not, for Allah loveth not those who exalt in riches, but seek with the wealth which Allah has bestowed on thee the home of the hereafter, nor forget thy portion in this world, but do thou benevolence, as Allah has been benevolent to thee, and seek not occasions for mischief in the land, for Allah loves not those who do mischief. He said, This has been given to me because of a certain knowledge which I have. Did he not know that Allah had destroyed before him whole generations which were superior to him in strength and greater in the amount of riches that they had collected, but the wicked are not called immediately to account for their sins. So he went forth amongst his people in the pride of his worldly glitter. Said those whose aim is the life of this world, oh, that we had the like of what Qarun has got, for he is truly a master of mighty benevolent fortune. But those who had been granted true knowledge said, alas for you, the reward of Allah in the hereafter is best for those who believe and work righteousness, but this one none shall attain, save those who steadfastly persevere in benevolence. Then we caused the earth to swallow up him and his house, and he had not the least little party to help him against Allah, nor could he defend himself. And those who had envied his position the day before began to say on the manana, ah, it is indeed Allah who enlarges the provision or restricts it to any of Allah's servants Allah pleases. Had it not been that Allah was gracious to us, Allah could have caused the earth to swallow us up. Ah, those who reject Allah will assuredly never prosper. That home of the hereafter we shall give to those who intend not high-handedness or mischief on earth, and the end is best for the righteous. If any does benevolence, the reward to him is better than his deed, but if any does evil, the doers of evil are only punished to the extent of their deeds. Verily Allah who ordained the Quran for thee will bring thee back to the place of return. Say, my Lord knows best who it is that brings true guidance and who is in manifest error. And thou hast not expected that the book would be sent to thee except as a mercy from thy Lord. Therefore lend not thou support in any way to those who reject Allah's message, and let nothing keep thee back from the signs of Allah after they have been revealed to thee, and invite men to thy Lord, and be not of the company of those who join deities with Allah. And call not besides Allah on another deity. There is no deity but Allah. Everything that exists will perish except Allah's own face. To Allah belongs the command, and to Allah will ye all be brought back. Tao Te Ching 70 a 75. My words are easy to understand, easy to practice. The world cannot understand, cannot practice. My words have basis, my actions have principle. People do not understand this, therefore they do not understand me. Those who understand me are few, thus I am highly valued. Therefore the sage wears plain clothes, but holds jade. To know that you do not know is highest. To know but think you know is flawed. To not know but think you know is flawed. Only when one recognizes the fault as fault can one be without fault. The sages are without fault because they recognize the fault as fault. That is why they are without fault. When people no longer fear force, they bring about greater force. Do not limit their place. Do not reject their livelihood. Because the ruler does not reject them, therefore they do not reject the ruler. Therefore the sages know themselves but do not glorify themselves, respect themselves but do not honor themselves. Thus they discard that and take this. The bold and daring will be killed. The bold and not daring will survive. Of these two, one may benefit, the other may harm. The one hated by heaven, who knows the reason? Even the sages still find this difficult. The Tao of heaven does not contend and yet excels in winning, does not speak and yet excels in responding, is not summoned and yet comes on its own, is unhurried and yet excels in planning. The heavenly net is vast, loose, and yet does not let anything slip through. People do not fear death. how can they be threatened with death? If people are made to constantly fear death, then those who act unlawfully, I can capture and kill them. Who would dare? There exists a master executioner that kills. If we substitute for the master executioner to kill, it is like substituting for the great carpenter to cut. Those who substitute for the great carpenter to cut, it is rarely that they do not hurt their own hands. The people's hunger is due to the excess of their ruler's taxation, so they starve. The people's difficulty in being governed is due to the meddling of their ruler, so they are difficult to govern. The people's disregard for death is due to the glut in their ruler's pursuit of life, so they disregard death. Therefore, those who do not strive for living are better than those who value living. Alhamdulillah Rahman Rahim, Allah Wabham. Deus noste que essenciales son da fakita no metum vahigusanam. Da kuda fehunda. Ja. Baruchata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam eshekatan bo mitzvotav v'tzivan l'sok b'divai Torah. Kyrie eleison. Siva mastu savajikatahem. Sabe sata bavadu sukitata. Vagabia. Ubuntu. Shabbat. Frekako. Akwaba upenana amani. Omchekam. Sheshe. Kamosunida. Domo arigato. Pilama yelo wakantakon. Talk odokashingun. God, we thank you for all that your blessings. Go with the God. Ata Jami Yata Falami. Aho. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Alhamdulillah Rahman Rahim. Allah Wabha. Deus nos aqui essenciales santo fakita no metum vahigusana. Da kuda fehunda. Ja. Baruchata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamod tzilachem min haaretz. Kyrie eleison. Sivu mastu savjikatahem. Sabe seta v'madu sukitata. Vagabia. Ubuntu. Shabbat. Frekako. Akwaba upendana amani. Omchekam. Sheshe. Kamosunida. Domo arigato. Pilama yelo wakatako. Toko dokashingun. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Go with the God. Ata Jamiyata Falami. Aho. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Amen. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Zaijen. Adios. Te chakaris. Asmugo. Kelego Fred. One love and peace.